Today, New South Wales renews its plea for help from other states as Sydney records its worst daily case numbers in this outbreak.
I want to remind those other states and territories that last time I looked, we were a commonwealth. We worked together. And it disturbs me that it would appear that all we've ever done to work together has just seemingly been cast aside.
Anti-lockdown protesters marched through Sydney streets with similar demonstrations planned around the country. A reassuring trend, Victoria announces 12 new local cases, all linked to the New South Wales outbreak. Australia avoids having the Great Barrier Reef put on UNESCO's in danger list. And delayed by a pandemic, but Tokyo's Olympics are officially underway. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Dan Borsha. Thousands of people are marching through Sydney's CBD in protest against Greater Sydney's lockdown. Parts of the protest became violent as small groups of people tried to storm past mounted police. Tim Swanson is there.
There's thousands of people here at a rally they're calling a freedom rally. Crowds gathered in Victoria Park earlier, then quickly amassed about, I'd say, several thousands who are now rallying through the Sydney streets. It looks like they're probably heading towards Hyde Park at this stage. Now, there were plenty of arrests earlier, several arrests before even the march really got underway at about midday or so. Now, the protest isn't authorised. New South Wales Police knocked back the approval to have the protest, but it's clear that people have still come out in seriously high numbers. There's a lot of anger here, both at the lockdown and the ongoing restrictions. People have criticised plenty of Gladys Berejiklian and her approach to handling this pandemic, and there's also a lot of people that are shouting slogans like "My body, my choice." There's plenty of onlookers in support of the crowds. A lot of motorists have been honking their horns in support. As I said, there were several arrests earlier, but we'll see how the rest of the day pans out at this stage.
Tim Swanson reporting there from Sydney. We'll have updates throughout the afternoon. And I just want to let you know that the Deputy Chief Medical Officer Michael Kidd will be stepping up to speak to media from here in Canberra in this hour. Meanwhile, Victoria is bringing in tougher measures to further combat the Delta variant of COVID-19 and to stop its spread. It's now declared all of New South Wales an extreme risk zone. Victoria today recorded 13 new locally acquired cases. Our reporter Stephen Schubert is in Melbourne. Stephen, how optimistic are health authorities feeling after today's number?
Good afternoon. Well, 12 new cases here in Victoria today. That is a marked decrease from the last couple of days where we saw cases in more than 20. And authorities are feeling optimistic because they can track where each and every one of those cases have come from. And 10 out of those 12 cases were already isolating while they were infectious. Victoria is in a statewide lockdown until 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday night. There's no decision yet as to whether that will be lifted at that time or whether the lockdown will be extended. They obviously want more data coming in over the next few days before there's a call made on that. But the authorities are feeling more confident that the situation here in Victoria is under control. Let's have a listen to Health Minister Martin Foley.
The number of people moving about in the community when infectious, as I say, is trending down, which is a good thing. That's a critical part of stopping the virus spreading in our community, and when attended to, the wider restrictions that are in place gives our public health team the confidence that they can look to. Too early to call yet as to what might be the position come Tuesday night.
Stephen, tough new measures are coming into force to stop the spread of the virus from New South Wales. Just what is being put in place?
Victoria has now declared New South Wales an area of extreme risk. People couldn't come into Victoria from New South Wales. It was effectively a hard border anyway, except for returning residents who could apply for a permit. But other states like South Australia and then other places like the ACT, which doesn't have any COVID cases but is obviously ensconced by New South Wales, were also declared red. But so New South Wales has just had an extra layer of declaration, effectively signalling that people can't come back in at all unless they meet fairly strict exemption rules. Here's our Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton.
It really does relate to the caseload in any one jurisdiction, the trends over time, how much we expect cases to emerge each and every day. In South Australia, they've had a dozen plus cases over the last few days, but they're in lockdown. Those numbers seem to be stabilising for a population of over 1.5 million. For New South Wales, 163 cases today, close to 2,000 active cases now. That's a big caseload. The risk of people coming from New South Wales having been potentially exposed to others who are infectious is much higher than for South Australia ACT.
And Stephen, we saw some pretty strong language coming from the Health Minister today. In fact, ratbaggery was the term the Minister used to describe those who are flouting the rules and using what I think he termed the constitutional rights of movement. I wonder if you can expand on that, around just that exasperation that we're now hearing from the political leaders there in Victoria.
Yeah, pardon me, Dan, I know you were showing pictures before of that protest in Sydney, and we've actually just come back. That press conference with the Health Minister was at the Health Department HQ in the city, on Lonsdale Street in the city. And as we were coming back to the ABC studios in Southbank, we got caught up by this protest. There's no official estimate yet as to how many people were out on the streets marching against this lockdown, but I would be comfortable estimating it would be several thousands of people. We've had a helicopter in the sky getting shots, and it is a lot of people. Very few people wearing masks and no social distancing that I could see from the vantage point I was at. So this has extremely frustrated authorities. The police were out in force, but you could see quite early on that the police let the crowds through. There simply, from what I could see, weren't enough police to do anything else but to let that crowd through. From what I could see, it was all fairly peaceful at that point, but this will keep going on. The Victoria Police had warned people not to come out, not to protest, so we will be seeking, of course, an update from police on whether any arrests have been made or any fines have been issued, Dan.
Stephen Schubert, appreciate the update there from Melbourne. Keep us up to date. Thousands of people are marching through Sydney's CBD in protest against those Greater Sydney lockdowns. Parts of the protest have become violent as small groups of people tried to storm past mounted police. And I just want to let you know that we have got those live pictures there that we're seeing of the police on mounted horses there, moving some of that group back. We've also got a statement that's come from police saying that a high visibility policing operation was launched in response to, quote, unauthorised protest activity in Sydney about 12 noon today to ensure the safety of participants as well as the community and local business. Officers from across Central Metropolitan Region, assisted by specialist resources, were deployed. They went on to say that there have been a number of people who have been arrested, adding that as some of those people disperse, movement out of the city is being facilitated down George Street, which I suspect is some of what we are seeing there right now. Trains continue to operate. For those at the northern end, access is via Wynyard and Circular Quay Railway Station as well, and mentioning that St James and Museum Railway stations are closed. And rounding out that news statement coming from the New South Wales Police Force is that they recognise and support the rights of individuals and groups to exercise their right of free speech and peaceful assembly. However, today's protest is in breach of the current COVID-19 public health orders, and saying that the priority for New South Wales Police is always the safety of the wider community. And police are making this appeal, saying that if anyone has any information about that, the coordination and the organisation of that particular rally, to call Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000 or to visit newsouthwales.crimestoppers.com.au. And we are bringing you up to speed throughout this afternoon with these very fluid and unfolding situations right across the nation, in fact, today. And in fact, some of the questions that we heard being put to Martin Foley, the Victorian Minister for Health, were around this question that came up at National Cabinet yesterday about whether or not New South Wales would have access to additional vaccinations in order to spread those out. And in fact, some of the comments that we heard in that news conference much earlier this morning from Brad Hazzard, the New South Wales Health Minister, really pointing to whether this is one of those quote-unquote Team Australia moments, him calling on, in fact, the Commonwealth, the states and territories to help out. Mr Hazzard going on to say that in Victoria's hour of need, that there were thousands of his team from New South Wales who went to help out. And as by way of response from Victoria, Martin Foley saying that New South Wales' fight is Australia's fight. So I just wanted to bring you some of the context of the political discussion today. We're going to head to South Australia now, where there has been one new locally acquired COVID-19 case recorded today, which takes the number of cases in that state to 16. Our reporter Stacey Lee is in Adelaide and joins me now. Stacey, what can you tell us about that new case?
Dan, authorities were pretty positive since there was just one new case in South Australia today. It is a man in his 60s who attended the Tenerife Creek Winery in the Yatalunga area on Sunday afternoon. He is the husband of a woman who tested positive earlier in the week, and authorities say they had transferred both of them to the COVID positive hotel in Adelaide's CBD. So they're pretty confident that the man wasn't out in the community while infectious. Here's what we heard from our Chief Public Health Officer, Nicola Spurrier, a little bit earlier.
We want to get on top of it very quickly. We do not want to be in the situation of New South Wales. So there's a lot more people. We have spread the net a lot wider, so there indeed will be more people in quarantine. It is impossible to contact all 5,000 all at the same time, all immediately, but the team are working through from the higher risk, the higher tier, and working through making that contact. It may be that you will go your 14 days and you won't hear directly from somebody phoning you up on the phone, but we will be continuing to contact via SMS.
Stace, the big question is, will South Australia's lockdown end on Tuesday, as has been touted?
Yes, we heard from our Premier Stephen Marshall that he believes at this stage it will be ending after the forecast 7-day lockdown if things continue to trend the way they're going. At the moment we have 16 in this cluster, but with one new case yesterday and just the one case today, authorities say it is heading in the right direction. They're also been buoyed by the large amount of people getting tested. 23,410 tests were taken yesterday. It's the second highest in the state, only beaten by the day before, which was 23,500. And just to give you a bit of an idea of how many that is here in South Australia, on a regular day they get between 3,000 and 5,000 tests. So they've been able to ramp up the number of tests pretty quickly, but over the past few days we have been seeing a lot of people lining up and waiting for long periods of time to get tested, some people waiting upwards of 12 hours. That does seem to have levelled out now. We've had some new testing sites open up and those lines have been kept a little bit shorter, well, much significantly shorter. The wait is only around an hour today. But here's what our Premier Stephen Marshall had to say about the likelihood of coming out of lockdown next week as planned.
All of the signs are that the people of South Australia are taking this extraordinarily seriously. They're working with SA Health, they're working with SA Police. They're doing the right thing, they're minimising movement around, they're getting tested, they're using the QR codes and they're booking in for their vaccinations when due. So a massive, massive thank you. I've got to say, I feel very proud to be a South Australian at the moment, a state that is taking this extraordinarily seriously and a state that is now on track to come out of lockdown on Tuesday next week and have our students back at school on Wednesday next week.
Now, authorities have also said, because they are still concerned about the way the situation's going in the state, they did request from the Commonwealth that any inbound international flights be cancelled. That was agreed by the federal government. So 3 flights that were due in from overseas on Monday and Tuesday next week have now been cancelled. They won't be coming into Adelaide anymore, so SA Health can divert its resources to this cluster. And the Premier, Stephen Marshall, reaffirmed his comments of yesterday that South Australia won't be sending any of its Pfizer vaccines to New South Wales, despite the request from the New South Wales Premier, Gladys Berejiklian.
Stacey Lee reporting there from Adelaide. New South Wales has again recorded its highest number of new local infections in the Delta outbreak, with 163 new cases. At least 45 of those were infectious in the community. State Health Minister Brad Hazzard says families getting together has been one of the key reasons cases continue to rise. He also pleaded with his interstate counterparts to send doses of the Pfizer vaccine.
I want to stress again that when we look at the numbers, what we see is transmission, particularly as a result of family members getting together when they just should not be getting together. We also are seeing transmission in shops and in other workplaces. So again, the message to the community is we really do need, you've come out in great numbers to be tested, but we don't want you out at all from your home unless you're allowed to come out for one of the reasons that our Chief Health Officer and her team have advised that you can come out for. Out of that 163 cases, there were 66 cases that arose directly as a result of being household contacts. 25 arose as a result of being close contacts. And very worryingly, 45 were infectious out in the community. In other words, 45 people were out walking around and potentially spreading the virus, which certainly explains why our numbers are going up. I want to remind those other states and territories that last time I looked, we were a commonwealth. We worked together. And it disturbs me that it would appear that all we've ever done to work together has just seemingly been cast aside. When we have bushfires, when we have floods, people from our state go to help others. We know that, and I can't thank New South Wales residents for the years and years of contribution to other states. Equally, those other states send their community, their emergency workers, their fire workers, their SESs. They come to us and help. I certainly ask for the other leaders in our other states to reflect on that, because we need the Pfizer that they may have not such a great need for at the present time. We have a very young population in southwest and Western Sydney, and based on the advice that the federal government have given after they took advice from their experts, their medical experts, there are many people in those areas at this stage that are really in need of Pfizer. We need them to have the Pfizer. So I would just ask again for that to be considered.
Other news now, and the first official day of Olympic competition is finally underway in Tokyo. But before it began, there was, of course, the opening ceremony, a year late and a very different event this time around. A national sport reporter and Olympic correspondent is in Tokyo and says the atmosphere was positive, albeit with a much smaller crowd.
Well, Dan, given that there's an atmosphere, a crowd of 68,000 can make it into the Olympic Stadium, and there was only about 10,000 people there, the atmosphere was actually surprisingly good. And I suppose that's because it was a great light show. There was lots of, noise through the PAs, and, the fact that there was about 10,000 people there, they were mainly dignitaries, some media and team officials and so on, did give it a little bit of atmosphere. So it wasn't a completely dead, a dead atmosphere. It was pretty good, really. It was a more restrained opening ceremony than we've seen in previous Olympics, but that probably goes hand in hand with the sort of Olympics we're having. It's a COVID city, it's a COVID Olympics, so it makes sense that it was a little bit more low-key. Nevertheless, it was good fun, and obviously the people there who all enjoyed it, the athletes seemed to have a great time, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of the photos there of the teams from around the world, the Australian team just a moment ago. So David, now competition is underway. What's the highlights for the Australian team today?
Well, it's been a great start for the Australian men's hockey team, the Kookaburras. They had a bit of a fright against the host nation, Japan. The Kookaburras are the #1 team in the world. Japan ranked 17th. The Kookaburras came out, scored 2 goals and looked really on top, but in the second quarter of the match, Japan scored 3 goals in 6 minutes to give them a real fright. But the Kookaburras slowly asserted their dominance in the second half, and they ended up winning that match 5-3. So a really good start for them. We've just begun the men's road race. Now, Dan, this, for cycling fans, or fans of torture if you like, is going to be one of the most gruelling events of these Olympic Games. It's over 240 kilometres. There's 4 kilometres of climbing, so the riders have to make their way over 3 really significant climbs. It leads from just outside Tokyo, around the northwest of Tokyo, out towards Mount Fuji and the Mount Fuji Speedway. That's only just begun, and it will probably take the best part of 5 or 6 hours. But Australia's represented there by Richie Porte and Luke Durbridge, Lucas Hamilton. It's going to be a really interesting race to see how that goes. Richie Porte, of course, did just race in the Tour de France, but very much as a domestique, so we won't know really what his true form was like, but he would be the outstanding chance for Australia, given he's such a good climber. But the Tour de France champion, Tadej Pogacar, is in the race as well, and you'd have to think that he's one of the very strong favourites, given that there's so much climbing in this race. Australia's women's softball team played a short while ago against Canada. Unfortunately for them, they lost 7-1, so it hasn't been the greatest Olympics for them. And then this afternoon, the Matildas, probably Australia's favourite sporting team, will take on Sweden. Now, Sweden beat the United States, who are the #1 team in women's football in the world, just a few days ago. So that's going to be a great test for the Matildas this afternoon.
Yeah, one we'll be watching for sure. Dave, looking a bit more afield, what are some of the other highlights still to come up on the first official day of competition?
We're getting to see some of the new sports, Dan. So 3x3 basketball, now that's actually how you pronounce it. It's 3-on-3 basketball, but it's actually, the official title is 3x3, is making its Olympics debut at this Olympic Games. That's begun today, and that's a pretty exciting sport. It really picks up from those sort of games in America, pickup games in America of 3-on-3 basketball, and it's become an Olympic sport. So that started. Good to watch if anyone gets a chance. For the local fans, sports like judo and taekwondo, which they're very strong in, have begun today as well. Also a lot of the rowing, some shooting events. There is just so much sport going on. It's almost impossible to sort of keep across it all. Tennis as well. So Australia's John Millman playing in the singles today in the tennis. So huge amounts of sport going on, and it's only going to get busier over the next few days as more and more sports begin. Tonight, of course, the swimming heats begin. The finals are in the morning. So Elijah Winnington, Australia's 400-metre freestyle swimmer, will be swimming in his heats tonight, and he's a really good chance for a medal, if not a gold medal, tomorrow morning. So we'll be watching that one very closely indeed.
The Great Barrier Reef will not be added to UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites in danger this year, with the United Nations body agreeing to reconsider its decision in 2022. Last month, UNESCO's scientific advisors recommended adding the reef to the list, mostly because of the impacts of climate change. A whirlwind diplomatic mission by Environment Minister Susan Lee gained enough support to override the recommendation, with 12 countries moving a motion to reconsider it at a later meeting.
What is going to happen is that a reactive monitoring mission will take place. A report will be prepared in that time frame, and the item will be reconsidered by the committee. And the critical thing from this is that reactive monitoring mission. Remember that the technical advisory bodies to UNESCO have not visited and, if you like, inspected our reef and the brilliant management of $3 billion of investment and all of the work that we're doing since 2012, nor have they looked at the latest science, some of which is very positive.
The Queensland government has been clear to the Australian government that it sees the Australian government needs to step up financially in some of those key land-based issues of water pollution, coastal management. There's been correspondence between the Premier and the Prime Minister detailing ways that increased investment could help the reef. But as I mentioned previously, the number one priority is climate change here. Australia is increasingly out of step internationally by refusing to increase its ambition on climate.
Medical leaders in the United Kingdom have criticised changes to self-isolation rules, warning that exempting healthcare staff is a desperate and potentially unsafe policy. The head of the newly formed UK Health Security Agency says the NHS COVID app was essential and it was inevitable that a large number of people would be asked to isolate given the steep rise in cases.
COVID case surges in some communities are now putting increasing strain on local hospitals. In Liverpool, patient numbers have increased sharply. Some non-urgent operations are being cancelled to free up beds, with staff moved to support colleagues in critical care.
This wave is different. The people we're seeing are younger, and that's really very distressing for our staff. I think sometimes people think because they're young that COVID can't affect them and it can't damage them. That's absolutely not the case. It can affect everybody.
Health leaders argue that with the risk of a further spread of infections, self-isolation is essential when required, and they've defended the NHS COVID app.
The pingdemic is because we have a pandemic. We know that you're 5 times more likely to become a case yourself if you've been a close contact. And this is the way that we can stop transmission occurring through the country. So this is not an inconvenience. It is actually an essential intervention for all of us.
The Office for National Statistics Infection Survey suggests there were just over 830,000 people in the UK who had the virus last week, up 27.5%, though a slower rate of increase than in the previous 2 weeks. In England, it was 1 in 75 with the virus. In Wales, 1 in 210, and Northern Ireland, 1 in 170 people, in all 3 of which there were increases. But in Scotland, with 1 in 80, the trend was said to be uncertain.
If I just take your temperature.
Luke had opted not to have the vaccine. He tested positive for COVID and needed hospital treatment. He thinks he caught the virus when watching Euros football in the pub with friends.
A lot of people I know had to self-isolate, but I'm the only one that I know of that has got it and got it quite bad. So I'm the unlucky, one of the unlucky few, but you've got to sort of reevaluate your options and, get the jab.
Health officials confirm the gathering of fans for the Euros in England could well have fuelled higher case rates, with more men than women testing positive and behaviour away from the matches being a key factor.
For example, long distance travelling in a coach or the socialising in drinks and close social contact around the event. But yes, we have seen a little bit of a spike in cases which would fit with the time frame from some of those events.
As to what happens next, a lot will depend on how much people mix with others following the lifting of legal restrictions in England.
Briefly to the weather around the country. Looking ahead to tomorrow's forecast for the capital cities, Brisbane and Sydney will be windy tomorrow. Canberra will have some showers. Windy with showers in Melbourne. Hobart will have possible showers. Adelaide windy with easing showers. Perth will have possible showers. Darwin will be mostly sunny. And that's where we farewell our Perth viewers. Hello and welcome, I'm Dan Borsha. Millions of Australians are currently in lockdown and many others are adhering to restrictions and isolation orders. Over the course of the pandemic, we've learnt that this isolation often comes loneliness and a sense of boredom. So what better way to counteract that than by getting a little creative? Dickon Loxton has come up with an idea that fits that bill, bringing smiles to the faces of his local community by documenting global events through duck designs on his driveway.
It was based on the book We're Going on a Bear Hunt, so we thought that was a good idea. So we got a whole lot of bears in from a supermarket delivered and put them out. But then we discovered we had to bring them back in again every time it rained. So why not get something a little bit more waterproof? And I've always loved ducks. They've always been sort of iconic. So we started off with a family of 1 big duck and 54 little ducks. And then we decided that was working well, so we got 180 friends for them. And then I'd seen someone do a tableau on a video, an English comedian. I thought that's a good idea. So as you're showing on the screen, since then we've had 48 different tableaux on the driveway, and they're to amuse me. They're to amuse my grandchildren, who are all part of our household, but mainly they're to amuse people who pass by, for the kids and the grown-ups. People cross the street to say how much they love them. We get little donations of little ducks. In fact, we had one which was of a whole lot of ducks in boats doing the Gallipoli landing. And one day, a little boat with the Union Jack, when they were boats with Australian flags at the back of them, all with ducks, that's the Suez Canal there, invading Turkey. And someone put another little boat with a whole lot of little ducks and a Union Jack on the back of it. And we've had blue ducks and green ducks and Christmas ducks and all sorts of cards. But just wonderful. You're just out there. My mother was an artist, and that's a painting by her just behind me. But I think there's a creative streak in all of us, and it's fun. And reaching out to the community is even better, I think.
Isn't that just excellent? Well, very soon we're going to be hearing from the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Professor Michael Kidd, here in Canberra. You can see that news conference set up there. We'll take you to that news event as soon as he steps up to the podium in just a moment's time. Port Adelaide has celebrated Travis Boak's 300th game in the AFL with a 28-point win over Collingwood at Docklands. The Power won 97-69 with Charlie Dixon kicking 4 goals and Todd Marshall adding 3. Boak also had a memorable milestone game, finishing with 30 disposals and 7 clearances as the Power strengthened their hold on 4th spot. The Magpies lost captain Scott Pendlebury to a power leg injury. In the NRL, Melbourne has posted its 15th straight win. The Storm defeated North Queensland 20 points to 16. Josh Addo-Carr scored a double for the defending premiers as they held off a late surge by the Cowboys. Sydney Roosters fullback James Tedesco starred in his side's 28 points to 8 victory over the Newcastle Knights on the Sunshine Coast. He had 4 try assists and ran for 224 metres to reinvigorate the Roosters' top 4 hopes. The Olympics are officially underway, with Tokyo organisers putting on a display using drones and other high-tech marvels. But some of the most heartfelt moments were a look back to the past, 1964, when the Japanese capital became the first place in Asia to host the Games. Australia's slimmed-down delegation was led by Paddy Mills and Kate Campbell, with a special nod to Australian pistol shooter Elena Galabovich. Her work on the front line fighting the COVID-19 pandemic in Melbourne was acknowledged with the privilege of carrying in the Olympic flag into the stadium on behalf of Oceania. North Asia correspondent Jake Sturmer reports from Japan's Olympic Stadium.
While this beautiful stadium may have been only filled with around 900 VIPs and several thousand media, the closest that most of the Japanese public could get was lining the streets outside, and quite a few turned up, several thousand I would estimate. And even though they couldn't see what was happening inside, they said that they came here to soak up some of the atmosphere and some of the excitement, whatever they could, for what was meant to be their home Olympics. When there were fireworks, there were plenty of oohs and ahs as that shot off. People wanted to see more fireworks, certainly the ones that we spoke to here. Those that had figured out ways to watch it on their phones had quite a huddle of people around them, and they saw the ceremony which paid tribute to medical workers. There was a nod to Japan's hosting of the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo with wooden rings, and of course the person who lit the cauldron, lit the flame, Naomi Osaka, the tennis star, was chosen as the person to carry the flame and light the final cauldron, which was inside of a flower. There were some small protests sort of along the streets here, but they were more noisy than quite large, and I think most of the people we spoke to said that they were disruptive and kind of ruined their experience. The protesters wanted the Olympics to be cancelled and this to all be called off, which of course has not happened. There is, though, anxiety amongst most Japanese about the state of the virus situation in Japan. The capital recorded 1,300 plus new cases yesterday, and that's the sort of number that generates a little bit of unease. Olympic organisers are certainly hoping that now that the opening ceremony has finished and the real competition, the real sport begins in earnest, that anxiety will shift towards excitement as the sport and competition truly begins.
The lockdown in South Australia has seen a number of festivals cancelled, including the popular Winter Reds Wine Festival. Adelaide wineries are not only impacted by the South Australia lockdown, but also the lockdowns. In fact, we're going to leave that there and take you to Michael Kidd speaking now to media here in Canberra. In fact, we're
actually in the Greater Sydney area. In the past 24 hours, there have been 178 reported new cases of COVID-19 in Australia, with only 2 of these overseas acquired among people in quarantine. 176 of the new cases have been locally acquired, and this includes 163 newly reported cases in New South Wales, 12 newly reported cases in Victoria, and 1 newly reported case in South Australia. There have now sadly been 6 deaths associated with the recent COVID-19 outbreak, and my thoughts are with the family members and the other loved ones of those who have died. Reported cases in New South Wales, 12 newly reported cases in Victoria, and 1 newly reported case in South Australia. There have now sadly been 6 deaths associated with the recent COVID-19 outbreak, and my thoughts are with the family members and the other loved ones of those who have died. Australia currently has 174 people with COVID-19 in hospital. 41 people are in intensive care units, and that includes 20 people who are on ventilators. The growing number of people with serious disease in intensive care reinforces the seriousness of this current outbreak. Yesterday, 174,000 COVID-19 tests were carried out in Australia, including 93,000 tests in New South Wales alone, and thank you to everybody who was tested yesterday. Globally, in the past 24 hours, there have been over 698,000 new cases of COVID-19 reported and 8,673 reported deaths from COVID-19. This pandemic continues to cause serious disease and deaths in many countries around the world. Today, we have passed 11 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines being delivered in Australia. We've had 1 million doses administered in the past 7 days, and I thank everybody who's lined up to be vaccinated, but also the wonderful nurses and doctors and support people who are delivering vaccinations to the people of our country, and everyone involved in our nationwide vaccination effort. Despite the high number of people being vaccinated in the past week, we still need people coming out in mass numbers over the weekend. If you're eligible, I urge you to get vaccinated today or tomorrow. The outbreak in New South Wales continues to grow, and the risk of disease, particularly in the most seriously affected regions in the Greater Sydney area, is likely to continue to be significant over coming days. The original advice from the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, ATAGI, was that in a large outbreak, the benefits of the AstraZeneca vaccine are greater than the risk of rare side effects for all age groups. That advice has not changed. I urge everyone in Australia aged over 60 years of age to get vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccine now. Do not wait. We have plenty of AstraZeneca vaccine available through general practices and other vaccination sites. The AstraZeneca vaccine prevents serious illness and saves lives. The risk of serious disease and death from COVID-19 infection is significant for those aged over 60. We now have more than 75% of people in Australia aged over 70 years of age who have received a COVID-19 vaccination, but we need to protect everyone. Please encourage the older people in your life to get vaccinated now if they have not already done so. In addition, the advice from ATAGI is that all individuals aged 18 years and above in Greater Sydney, including adults under 60 years of age, should strongly consider getting vaccinated with any available vaccine, including AstraZeneca. This is on the basis of the increasing risk of COVID-19 and ongoing constraints of supply of the Pfizer vaccine. In addition, people in areas where outbreaks are occurring can receive the second dose of AstraZeneca vaccine 4 to 8 weeks after the first dose, rather than the usual 12 weeks, to bring forward their optimal protection. Maximal protection requires 2 doses of either vaccine, but even a single dose of either vaccine provides substantial protection by more than 70% against hospitalisation. If you have received a single dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine and you get infected with COVID-19, the vaccine partially reduces the risk of transmission to other people by about half, and therefore will also benefit your close contacts and the wider community. It should also be noted, though, that there is a delay of 2 to 3 weeks after receiving a first dose of vaccine and being protected from COVID-19. A second reason for ATAGI to recommend that individuals strongly consider vaccination at this time is emerging data about severity of disease. It is becoming apparent that the Delta variant may be more severe than the original strain of the virus. The proportion of infected people less than 60 years of age requiring hospitalisation now appears to be higher than what was reported in outbreaks with the original strain. So this also reinforces the benefit of protection with either vaccine. People considering vaccination should be informed of the benefits and risks, and they should provide their informed consent. People who receive the AstraZeneca vaccine should be aware of the symptoms of thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome and when they should seek medical attention. Early detection of this syndrome means that people can get treatment and this can improve their outcomes. So a reminder that anyone with an unusual or persistent headache or abdominal pain 4 or more days following the AstraZeneca vaccine should seek urgent medical assessment. ATAGI has also reinforced that the interval between the first and second doses of Pfizer is 3 to 6 weeks, providing some flexibility in managing the available supplies of vaccine, while also noting that 2 doses are required for optimal protection. Spacing Pfizer to a routine interval of 6 weeks would allow limited vaccine supplies to be redirected to obtain first dose protection in outbreak areas of greatest need. Operation COVID Shield has been working with the states and territories to provide them with their future allocations of vaccines until the end of this year. The Commonwealth has also provided an additional emergency allocation of 300,000 vaccine doses, 150,000 AstraZeneca, 150,000 Pfizer, to New South Wales last week. The Commonwealth will increase the emergency allocation to New South Wales of additional doses of Pfizer from 150,000 to 200,000 doses this week. As the supply of vaccines increases, the Commonwealth stands ready to continue to work with the states and territories to support the rollout of vaccines. The Commonwealth will constantly assess requests against any reserves held by the Commonwealth. In New South Wales, the Commonwealth will be providing a sustained weekly increase of an additional 20,000 doses to general practices and an additional 20,000 doses to New South Wales government clinics on an ongoing basis. This increase is consistent with increases for all states and territories on a per capita basis. A reminder that we now have over 1,250 general practices across Australia administering the Pfizer vaccine, and it's anticipated this number of practices involved in administering Pfizer will increase to 1,550 by the end of this coming week. I'm happy to take any questions. Can I go to Tom on the phone?
Thanks, Professor, for taking the question. Just on those additional 50,000 Pfizer doses that are being sent to New South Wales, what difference will those doses particularly make to containing this outbreak? How significant is 50,000 doses in the context of this outbreak? And more broadly, how much difference can vaccines make in the short term to containing this outbreak in Sydney? Are vaccinations at a very fast pace the answer, or are other measures like lockdown, distancing, etc. the way out?
Yes, thank you, Tom. So firstly, obviously every additional vaccine is an additional person who is provided with extra protection, and an additional person where if they do get exposed to COVID-19, their risk of becoming seriously unwell is reduced, their risk of transmitting to other people is reduced as well. So every dose of the vaccine counts, and that's why it's so important that so many people are queuing up and getting their vaccines over recent weeks, and thank you to everybody who is doing that. But you are quite right, vaccination is one component of our response to COVID-19. It's absolutely essential that people are following the requirements, the restrictions in the state or territory where they're based, and of course this is most important in the affected areas in New South Wales, in the Greater Sydney area. And so people should be staying in their homes except for that limited number of reasons that people are allowed outside of their homes on any day. Obviously, the more we reduce the opportunity for people to interact with other people, the more we reduce the risk of transmission of COVID-19, the quicker we bring this outbreak under control, the fewer people who are exposed and put at risk of serious disease. Thanks, Tom. Stella?
Thank you, Professor. Just on the protest in Sydney, that anti-lockdown protest in Sydney today, are you concerned that this will become a super spreader event? And also, I mean, we have other protests across Australia today. What's your response to this? I mean, just in general, how dangerous is this?
Well, people need to be following the restrictions which have been put in place by the government of the state or territory where they're based. I'm very concerned if people are not following those restrictions. I'm very concerned if people are not wearing masks when they should be. I'm very concerned if people are not maintaining appropriate physical distancing from other people. When that happens, there is the risk that we will get spread of COVID-19. This is even more imperative during this outbreak with this Delta variant than it was during the times last year when we saw similar protests. This puts people's lives at risk, so please adhere to the restrictions in the state or territory where you're based. Thanks, Stella.
Four questions, if I can, Professor. Speaking about the delaying of the second Pfizer dose, what impact does that have on your protection?
Yes, so obviously you get protection after the first dose, as I highlighted, and then you get the optimal protection after you've received the second dose of either of these vaccines. And this is why we've looked at shortening the dose for the AstraZeneca vaccines in the outbreak areas in New South Wales. But for the Pfizer vaccine, ATAGI's advice has always been between 3 to 6 weeks. Now, obviously, whether someone gets the vaccine in 3 weeks or 6 weeks depends on appointments which have already been made. We don't want to be disrupting the current vaccine rollout in the many centres right across Australia, but particularly in New South Wales. We don't want to be causing confusion amongst people who are due to get their second doses. But that advice is there, and it's there for the people administering vaccines in individual sites.
Does it change the level of protection, though, delaying that second dose or not?
Well, it's a balance. It's a balance between having more people receiving a first dose and therefore receiving that level of protection that I outlined against getting the full 100% protection that comes from getting the second dose of the vaccine. What we've seen overseas in other countries where there has been some delaying of second doses is you get more people protected and therefore a benefit in reducing possible transmission.
We understand that the vaccines, especially Pfizer and AstraZeneca, are distributed on a per capita basis. According to the government documents, Victoria's currently received 1.8 million, New South Wales 1.4. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, so that's a question we'll probably have to put to Lieutenant General Fruin, who's involved in the logistics of vaccine allocation.
And just quickly, do you understand when there will be enough doses onshore of Pfizer for the rest of the eligible population?
Yes, so as we know, we're getting increased doses of Pfizer during this current quarter, the third quarter of this year, and there'll be even more doses coming in the fourth quarter of this year. And as we've been told, we can expect that all people who wish to receive vaccination against COVID-19 will be able to have done so by the end of this year.
Just last one. In your opinion, is there a public health need for a ring of steel around Sydney to protect other states? Do you believe it would have any effect in this current epidemiology setting?
Well, certainly New South Wales has acted to limit the movement of people right across the areas which are under lockdown. And so that is in place already. Of course, we still have people working in essential industries who need to travel. We need to have freight continue to move around Australia. We need to have food continue to be distributed across Australia so that people don't starve in our country. So there still needs to be some movement, but this has to happen in a COVID-safe way, and there is an imperative for every industry that's involved and the people working in those industries to make sure that they are doing everything they can not to put other people around Australia at risk. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to our interpreters. Thank you.
Michael Kidd there, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, going through some of those details from a national and international perspective, saying that tragically 6 people have died in this latest outbreak that is sweeping parts of the country, and passing on his condolences to the family and friends there who would, as you would understand, be having a very difficult time grappling with this, and that right now there are 174 people in hospital, 41 in intensive care, including 20 on ventilators, that yesterday there were 174,000 tests for COVID-19, including 93,000 in New South Wales. Moving on now, and Australia's men's hockey team has won its opening match at the Tokyo Olympics. The Aussies beat Japan 5-3. The Kookaburras led 2-0 at quarter time, but then conceded 3 goals in the second quarter to fall behind. But second half goals to Blake Govins, Aran Zalewski and Daniel Beale secured victory for the world number 1 ranked side. Australia plays India in its second match tomorrow. China has won the first gold medal of the Tokyo Olympics in the women's 10-metre air rifle. Yang Chen narrowly beat Russian markswoman Anastasia Galashina in the Eiffel Tower, while Nina Christen of Switzerland took bronze. Ellis Collier was best of the 2 Australians in the field, finishing 42nd. The lockdown in South Australia has seen a number of festivals cancelled, including the popular Winter Reds Wine Festival. Adelaide wineries are not only impacted by the SA lockdown, but also the lockdowns in New South Wales and Victoria, with fewer tourists and reduced demand from closed restaurants and bars. Jared Stringer is the Adelaide Hills Wine Region President. He says the loss of interstate travel has had a strong impact on the family-owned wineries.
We do host a few different festivals over the course of the year, and so it's always tricky to try and balance when we can reschedule, but that is our aim. We absolutely want to reschedule the Winter Reds Festival, and we're in talks with our members and with local government bodies to see if we can do that perhaps sometime in August. But of course, we're only halfway through a lockdown here in South Australia, so we want to wait and see what the outcome of this lockdown will be and whether or not we can reschedule, because it's a costly thing for our members, and it's a big undertaking to host this festival. So we want to make sure that if we do reschedule it, we can absolutely go ahead. So there is some financial help that's been announced by the South Australian government, which is in the form of a small payout that will help certainly our small to medium businesses in the Adelaide Hills. We are a relatively young wine region made up of a lot of family businesses, so they rely heavily on cash flow, and so this will be of a benefit to our members, but certainly it's not going to replace the income that was lost from this festival and from the reduced foot traffic, because also not only are we in lockdown, but level 4 restrictions, which we were in prior to this lockdown, also mean that we can't serve food or beverage indoors. And I'm sure if you can see behind me, but the incredibly cold, wet and wintry Adelaide Hills is not a place you want to be dining outdoors. So it does make it tricky, even coming out of a lockdown, if we're still in level 4 restrictions, for these businesses to go ahead. So any financial support is absolutely welcome. We rely quite a lot on interstate travel, particularly midweek. So we tend to, being one of the closest wine regions to a capital city anywhere in the world, we have a really good relationship with the people of the city of Adelaide who frequent our wineries, because it is only 15 minutes down the road. But certainly midweek traffic and those interstate guests who make long weekends, so Friday to Monday. Those numbers are severely impacted and have been for some time. Obviously, with the rolling border restrictions from Queensland to New South Wales to Victoria, this plays a big part in reducing our visitor numbers. So, yeah, certainly, these restrictions and border restrictions couldn't lift soon enough.
Let's take a look at the satellite now, and the weather fronts are generating very strong wind showers and hail in South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria and New South Wales. Showers are falling as snow on the mountains in Tasmania, Victoria and southern New South Wales. Looking around the country, it will be mostly sunny in Queensland, cool to mild in the east and breezy in the southeast. New South Wales will be mostly sunny and cool in the northeast, foggy then sunny in the south, and there'll be snow on the Alps. Victoria will be windy with showers and cold in the southwest. In Tasmania, there will be late showers, be cold in the south and windy with snow on the highlands. South Australia will be windy with showers and storms in the southeast. In WA, they'll have late showers with cool conditions in the southwest and mostly sunny and warm in the top end. Looking ahead to tomorrow's forecast for the capital cities, Brisbane and Sydney will be windy. Canberra will have showers. Melbourne will be windy with showers. Possible showers in Hobart. Adelaide will be windy with easing showers. Possible showers in Perth. And as you expected, mostly sunny in Darwin. That's the latest from ABC News. Remember, you can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on iView. I'm Dan Borscher. Thanks for your company.
For 20 years, Insiders has brought you the big political stories, the big political players.
Nothing to see here.
Now a government facing pressure over our vaccine rollout.
We're prisoners of our own success.
A new deputy PM and a looming election. Join me, David Spears, as I talk to the movers, shakers and big decision makers and unpack the latest in federal politics.
Insiders, tomorrow at 9 on ABC TV and streaming on iView.
A COVID-19 vaccine is your best defence and our only way forward. Now's the time to arm yourself, your family, your friends, your workmates, your community, someone you love.